Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Wine with Jimmy session. This one is on the diploma of the WSET, and this is on our fortified session. So this is our D5 or Unit 5 of WSET Diploma. Fortified wines, ports, sherries, things like Madeira, fortified muscats, including things like Rutherglen Muscat and other VDNs, Vin du Natural. This is on Rutherglen Muscat. So this is the first session of, I think, 5 videos on Rutherglen Muscat. And this will look at the history and the wine business of this small but very important fortified wine. This will be available as free content on YouTube, this video. All of the following videos, that's parts 2 to 5, are available only on my portal. That's winewithjimmy.com portal, which you can sign up to by visiting www.winewithjimmy. If you do have any comments, questions, or concerns, please pop them in the comment section below this video on YouTube, or get in touch via social media that are at the bottom of each slide. Or get in touch via the website winewithjimmy.com, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So first up then, we are looking at the history of Rutherglen Muscat, this gorgeous, lovely fortified wine from Australia. So a little bit of history and a little bit about the sales, the structure of the business and exports and so on. So we call this drop of wonderful liquid, this drop of heaven, we call it Australia's liquid gold. And it's actually very pertinent to call it that, because Rutherglen was a gold rush town of which millions of people flocked to. I say millions, but lots of people flocked to of course make a fortune, and the area boomed off the back of it. So Australia makes quite a variety of fortified wine styles, and some of those emulate, of course, what's famous from Europe and we find across the world, things like ports and sherries. So there are inspirations taken from those styles of fortified wine. But it is this one, Rutherglen Muscat, which certainly is unique in its style to Australia. And it's quite well known from a global standpoint as well. And there's a wonderful holding page there. Sydney may have a nice harbour, but Rutherglen has a great port, and that's because of this fortified wine that is produced here, of course. So just so we know where we are, Rutherglen is situated in the northern parts of Victoria, as you can see here, on the River Murray. And that is on the New South Wales border. So it is north of King Valley, and it's kind of north of what we call the Victorian Alps. So it's situated off Australia's longest river, the Murray, which stretches for about 2,500 kilometres. It's a very extensive river. And Rutherglen, the town, is just off the Murray Valley Highway. So that's that kind of mauvey, purpley area that the arrow is pointing to just there. As I mentioned with the history, vines were actually first planted in Rutherglen in 1851. Some texts say 50, but with the latest information I got from Wines of Australia, it's 1851. And gold was discovered here in 1858, as it says at the top of the slide. So, of course, off the back of that, with people realizing they can make some quick money, they flocked to this area. And the population, of course, boomed, and investment increased, and the region itself started to really progress. By 1890, so going towards the end of the 19th century, just before phylloxera, Rutherglen itself, which today is tiny, but Rutherglen then, and this is 130 years ago, produced 25% of Australia's wine, a lot of that being exported to the United Kingdom. We don't have a whopping amount of information about this style of wine, but we think that some of it would have been this kind of sweet fortified style, but there would have been a variety of wines produced in this area at the time. So the middle of the 19th century gold rush, and of course a boom from really the next sort of 30 years after that point. But then things came to an end because phylloxera came in. So at the end of the 19th century, 1890, parts of Victoria, of course, including Rutherglen, were affected by phylloxera. And it recovered and it replanted on resistant rootstocks. But with the new century into the 20th century, there was an end to cross-border tariffs, the Federation was created, and Rutherglen found it very challenging to rebuild up to its former glory. And the very popular and large areas of southeastern Australia, and certainly South Australia anyway, were overtaking it exponentially. So it found it difficult to compete with South Australia in the aftermath of phylloxera. Today, it is definitely a family affair. This area is small for volume of production and dominated by family growers. It's continued to produce full-bodied red wines, but also its unique fortified style as a point of difference, of course, what we're talking about. It is considered, Rutherglen, the capital, the Canberra of fortified wines in Australia. Many of the wineries, as I mentioned, are within the families still and have been making them for several generations. And there really has been a template of house style produced between these, or by rather, these families to create their own traditional unique style. And that's on things like fruit selection, the winemaking techniques, the maturation options, the blending choices. And we have a couple of these examples. So we have Pfeiffer wines, known for producing a real light and fresh house style, whereas All Saints and Morris are known for their more intense and luscious styles of Rutherglen Muscat. So the structure of the business. So there are really only a handful, well, a few really, maybe a few handfuls then of wineries, but some of them are really quite small. I think there's only something like 30 odd Rutherglen Muscats made across the board. But from what I can find from the Wines of Australia, which was released in a presentation I watched in December 2020. From what I saw was that there were 14 wineries currently on their listing, some of them probably only producing one style, but 14 wineries in total around the Rutherglen zone. So we have what's called the Muscat of Rutherglen Network, which is majority. They were founded in 1995 as a network company to really promote the sales of Rutherglen. And these include things like Stanton and Killeen, Morris, Chambers, Pfeiffer, Sepelt, Bullers, All Saints, and so on. But quite a powerful one. Of course, they dominate the network, and the rest of them will only be very small in their production. Really, the structure of business is that, of course, because it's family owned, they also, due to the generational progression, they'll actually own most of their vineyards. And most of the producers have estate grown fruit. Of course, there are small percentages of bought in fruit as well, but it's mainly estate grown fruit for the Rutherglens. Then we have the wine sales. So within Australia, or rather with Australia, fortified wines, that's all of their fortified wines, including their sort of imitation ports and sherries, but also Rutherglen Muscat, account for just 2% of Australian wine sales globally. Now, we are talking about a fortified category, which is a global category, is struggling, certainly with the powerhouses like sherry, for instance, in quite big decline. Port, stable, I suppose, in some areas declining and some increasing. And others like Marsala dramatically decreasing and Madeira being quite consistent. But it is generally a category which is struggling. These are wines today that were made in the old days rather to fortify, to keep them on their long sea journeys. Today we have other ways of keeping our wines fresh, so they're not so important today, but nonetheless we have a lovely category of fortified wines, as we know. What about the actual sales of Rutherglen? So demand is growing very gently, but it's from a very small base. There is only 411 hectares in the Rutherglen area. So very interestingly, of course, it's a small base, but growing. Asia, from 2016 to 2017, grew 50%. And Europe actually grew in the same time, so 2016, 2017, by 11%. So there is growth in certain markets. And the domestic market, the local market of Australia, is also showing some slight growth, around 1 to 2% during that same time, 2016, 2017. And that's the fortified category. Muscat was 8% growth. So there seems to be this real move of quality towards Rutherglen Muscat for the most part. Key exports tend to be today China, the UK, of course, we do find them over this side, and the US has a little bit. And key producers, Chambers Rosewood, fair big staple there, Campbell's, Stanton Killeen are some of the key ones that you will see. Campbell's quite important across a multitude of exports that we see. That really is the first session. Now, if you've been watching all the other fortified sessions, of course, with ports and sherries and Madeira, there are very long sessions. Rutherglen Muscat is a much more condensed, smaller section, of course, a very small region, so we won't need to know as much for the WSET Diploma. But I hope you've enjoyed it nonetheless. Next time around, we are going to talk about the grape growing environment, and we're going to go into all things like trellising and problems and climates and weather, and we'll have a little bit of a video as well, so we can bring into play places like the Victorian Alps and how that affects the area. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I've been Jimmy Smith of Wine with Jimmy. Any comments, questions, or concerns, please get in touch via the social media at the bottom of the slide, or by commenting on this video on YouTube, or by the website winewithjimmy.com. But until next time, if you wanted to watch parts 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the Muscat or Rutherglen Muscat series, you will have to go across to winewithjimmy.com and sign up to the online portal for the diploma. Thank you so much for your time and consideration. Take care of yourself. See you very soon. Goodbye.